Well, I guess we have to do this. Welcome everyone to Hall of Fame Friday. Yes, today is the week, rather I should say today is the reset, where the Horde has reached 100 guilds, defeating Mythic Jailer. So they have filled up the Hall of Fame, the achievement awarding you with the special title for a raid tier. Now, of course, every time we go around Hall of Fame period, people start comparing what the Horde is doing with what the Alliance is doing, of course, because it has been quite striking, the difference, the disparity between the Horde and the Alliance. So, cyclically, every tier we get to have this discussion about the disparity, the imbalance, the difficulty in managing the player base for the Alliance compared to the Horde when it comes to PvE, and in particular when it comes to raids. So let's take a look for a moment about the history of what happened in the past few expansions, at how the Alliance has been, if it was always this bad, at the very least recently, or if it has gotten into a pretty worrying trend over time. Because we all know that the Horde had better racials, okay? The Horde had racials that gave them power, gave them boosts in combat, like the Troll racial, the Orc racial were just better while you were in combat. So Blizzard over time went into some struggles to try to fix, to rebalance, to retune the racials to try to make it more even for the DPS specs in particular. However, what happened is that over time we actually ended up having the Alliance having the stronger racials. Even now, take whichever character you're playing, whichever spec and race, you can do your sims and you will see that generally speaking the Alliance races are the ones that are going to be stronger. Also, you've had things like the now renamed Every Man for Himself racial for the humans in PvP, which was the strongest racial in PvP, and now in Mythic Plus you even have had something for a while like Shadowmeld, which is also arguably the strongest Mythic Plus racial as well. So it's been a while since the Horde actually had better racials than the Alliance. Yet this disparity is still here. If we go all the way back since Legion, the expansion started with 32 Alliance guilds getting to kill the last boss, Xavius, by the time the Horde had 100. So the Horde Hall of Fame was closing and the Alliance was still at 32. This went rising for a bit, because in Trial of Valor the Alliance guilds were 40, and then in Nighthold the Alliance guilds were 42. This was the peak. This was the highest number the Alliance have had in terms of kills in comparison to the Horde in the past, I think, 8 years. After that, however, it's been a decline, because the latter half of Legion you have had Tomb of Sargeras where the Alliance guilds were 35, and then Antorus where the Alliance guilds were 27. This luckily did not give much hope to many Alliance players, because at the start of BFA we had a tremendous drop of Alliance guilds, because only 12 Alliance guilds were to defeat Gahun in Mythic difficulty, while the Horde got 100 guilds. This continued for a bit. In Crucible of Storms it was still just 12 Alliance guilds, and in Battle of the Tarlor it was just 15 Alliance guilds. We had a possible period, a brief period of optimism for the Alliance, because in Eternal Palace the Horde Hall of Fame was closing and the Alliance guilds that defeated Ajara were 19, and then in Nyalotha they were 20. This positivity was quickly crushed because we started Shadowlands, and we now are, definitely, guaranteed in the worst expansion for Alliance raid progression that we have had, at the very least since we can gather reasonable data about it. So at the very least since Wrath of the Lich King, this was the worst expansion for Alliance guilds, because at the start of Castelnatria, Hall of Fame of the Horde was closing and the Alliance guilds were 12. Then in Sanctum of Domination, Alliance guilds were 12 again, and now the new world record of the pressing stat, we have Sepulcher of the first ones with 9 Alliance guilds by the time the Horde gets to close their Hall of Fame. So this is the drastic difference that the Alliance has had over time, decreasing over time, because if you look at the graph for a better macro view of the progression in the past 3 expansions, we see that there is a trend. There is a trend that has been decreasing over time. And the more it decreases, the less of an incentive for other guilds to go back to Alliance and play. So this is why we are stopping here. This is why we are stopping at this Hall of Fame news about the Horde, to talk about this disparity between the Horde and the Alliance. Every time we hear about these news, there is plenty of people coming out with suggestions with how would they fix this, how would they solve this problem. So it's an interesting question to have. What would you do? What would be the solution you would have between the Horde and the Alliance to make them balanced again? Of course, a long recommended guess and suggestion to Blizzard was just remove factions, right? It's too late now. You can't force dozens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of players to go back to the Alliance. Plus, it's gonna be hard to stop it. If you imagine a world where 300,000 people just flee to Alliance because they are so much stronger than the Horde, how do you stop the bleed? How do you make sure that there are going to be enough Horde players left, that it's not going to be the same problem but reversed? So it's always been a problem. So players were suggesting just remove the factions, just make them raid together, right? This was one of the things that was suggested many times. We have gotten a ray of hope. In one of the previews of 9.2.5, we got the announcement that cross-faction play for PvE was going to get introduced. So no longer just the mercenary version of PvP, but now you're also going to be able to join raids with members of the opposite faction, as well as, more importantly, Mythic Plus with members of the opposite faction. This was the first great change, okay? Because yes, Mythic Plus doesn't actually change the imbalance of the raid, but it could be a very good incentive for players. Perhaps there are plenty of people who might have wanted to raid Alliance side, but they also want to do Mythic Plus, and they know how much harder it is to find groups, to find competitive groups in Mythic Plus when you are Alliance side. Even when we look, even just without looking at only the raid, if you look at the Mythic Plus, these have been the season's worth, this season's worth of keys in Mythic Plus for the Horde. That's a bit over 7 million, while the season's worth of Mythic Plus keys for the Alliance is 3.3 million, which is basically 70+% in favor of the Horde compared to 30% of the Alliance. Even when you look at keys, as Mythic Plus keys at higher levels and more competitive ranges, the Horde is towards the 80% of the size of the player base in Mythic Plus. So between both activities for PvE, this cross-faction play that will be introduced could be very, very important. Now, many players might not feel sick and tired of being Alliance because they will be able to find their Mythic Plus groups just fine. So that's the first big step. Obviously, the next problem becomes the guild. Because while Mythic Plus can be done in cross-faction, cross-realm, no problem, just form a group of 5 people and go, 30 minutes you're done, raid encounters are a little bit tougher because it requires a guild. It requires you to be organized around a guild, which can then be eligible for things like guild achievements, guild titles, progression, rankings, etc, etc. And this is something that Blizzard has said it's not planned, at the very least for the release of Dragonflight. So we already know that one of the possible features to solve world hunger, peace in our time, and faction imbalance won't happen at the release of Dragonflight because guilds won't be able to be faction shared. So the possibility to cross-raid with your opposite faction without the guild system being able to be cross-factioned is very, very unlikely. But at the very least, you have the Mythic Plus caveat, you have the Mythic Plus out when it comes to having a better time while playing Alliance. We have also seen other complaints or other possible solutions to this problem, because, you know, you might have seen and heard about this problem multiple times, and many times you hear very, I guess, misguided or perhaps just misinformed players who actually still believe that Horde has more players because the Horde racials are better. Horde has more players because their class combos with their race are stronger. This has not been true for several expansions. What is happening now to the Horde is a even bigger Snowball problem. And this will keep trickling down to the lower and lower level of players. This starts at world first guilds and then top 50 guilds, top 100 Hall of Fame guilds, top 200, top 500. Everyone will want to jump into the faction that will give them the most chances to reach their goal. Whether your goal is top 500 in the raid, top 200, Hall of Fame, you know, whichever the goal is, it keeps snowballing more and more players in the Horde's favor. And this is a problem because it doesn't have a quick solution. As I said, and as has been repeated multiple times, simply buffing the Alliance racials more is not going to solve anything. The racials are already balanced right now. Buffing the Alliance racials will just perhaps force all of the Horde players to go back Alliance again, and then you would have the same problem reversed. My simplest solution, and many other players' simplest solution, was just make cross-faction available. We know it's not going to be available in full. Okay, I'm not saying it won't be available at all, it just won't be available in full. So the question now is this half and half, is this test phase cross-faction going to be enough to bring some more balance to the factions? You know, is bringing parity in Mythic Plus, as well as bringing parity in pickup groups, or perhaps less competitive groups that want to raid, that don't really care about rankings, etc., so they keep cross-faction playing. Is that going to be enough to start rebalancing things around, or is the introduction of Mythic Plus cross-faction without the full-fledged out guild cross-faction for raiding, is it still going to be too little? That's going to be the main question. Because, you know, to be fair, if we exclude this possibility, what other solutions are there? You know, there could be a cynical answer from Blizzard. They could start kidnapping entire servers and force them to faction change, you know. Just look at the top 500 Horde guilds and then take the even numbers and force them back into Alliance. That could bring some more balance to the faction disparity. However, I'm assuming that would be considered a little bit too customer intrusive, a little bit of a violation of their rights, so perhaps that's not the angle Blizzard wants to go, which leaves me rather stranded in other possible solutions on how to fix this. I already gave up on finding too many other solutions back when I settled for cross-faction, you know, cross-faction is the answer. That's been my answer for a while, so this video is here, besides for debating this issue, also to let me guys know which of your possible answers could make sense for this situation, for this problem, which of the solutions you think might make sense. I don't think it's going to go away of its own, I don't think it's going to disappear. After all, we have seen the graph, we have seen the numbers, we are in the worst expansion ever for faction balance, so something might have to be done quickly to allow this faction split to be more even and more competitive and more interesting to essentially see in the game. So this was the question for today. In celebration of reaching Hall of Fame for the Horde, this was our cyclical debate that we have every Hall of Fame. We talk about the Horde and the Alliance, so this was it for today's video. Thank you guys, of course, again, as this light is just blinding me now. Okay. Darkness is much better. Thank you guys again, of course, for watching the video and for helping to grow and support the channel, which you can continue to do so even more with comments down below, as well as liking the video, and the last resort available, subscribing to the channel. Given that this is of course a Horde Chads related video, only Horde players for today are allowed to subscribe to the channel. This being said, thank you guys again, see you guys soon, and in the meantime, I mean, now perhaps it's a little bit too dark. I should probably just fade the light. Yeah, that's too much. But this should be better, yeah? Yeah. Better.